This program is being presented by the Dayton Metro Library. A Step Ahead would like to thank the Dayton Metro Library for providing us with this opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are a Step Ahead, and today we're going to be teaching you an introduction to Python.
Welcome, everyone. We are a Step Ahead, an organization that teaches coding, web designs, and robotics lessons through workshops and in-person and online lectures. Our sessions are free and open to all, and there will be a form at the end to fill out if you would like to receive a copy of the slideshow. Still, it's a good idea to take notes as we go through each slide in order to avoid falling behind. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
This is the agenda for today's workshop. First, we'll have a quick introduction to Python and Google Colab. Next, we'll cover data types, Python basics such as print, comments, variables, lists, logical operators, if-else, loops, functions, and more. Then we'll be creating a project, and finally we'll have a wrap-up and further details.
Websites are created using various coding languages. As a side note, if you press Ctrl-Shift-I and then go to More Tools and Developer Tools, you can actually see the code behind the websites that you're using. Today we're going to be teaching you the basics of one coding language, which is Python. You can take this knowledge to create a variety of projects, not just websites. For most of you, this is likely your first time, so it might get frustrating, but make sure not to give up. Remember, practice makes perfect.
Editing the notebook. The tool that we will be using today is Google Colab, so please follow the following instructions. The first is to go to the link provided, which is https://collab.research.google.com/. Once you get there, you're going to press on the New Notebook button, which you can see in the picture. Next, you're going to sign in with Google if it hasn't automatically signed you in. You're all set for your account now. Let's start with an introduction of Colab.
With Google Colab, you can use two different types of blocks, code blocks and text blocks. Code blocks are where you will do most of your programming as they contain the instructions that the machine will execute. The other block, text blocks, are where things that won't necessarily affect the program go. Those of you who've done programming with another language, or perhaps another IDE, will know that you can include comments in your program, which include things like instructions or explanations. These text blocks function much the same way comments do, and can be used when you don't want something to run in the code.
Running the code. Your code can be run three different ways. A, you can press the play button to the left of your program. B, you can do Control-Enter or Control-Shift-Enter, both which will start your program. The last way is to go to Runtime at the top and press Run Selection, which you could see in the picture. Pick which way works best for you. Now we're going to be discussing some of the different data types in Python.
Python has many different ways of storing information. An umbrella term for these methods of storage are data types, and examples include numbers, like integers and floats, booleans, which are true or false values, and strings, which store letters and characters.
Numbers. In Python, there are two different types of numbers: int, or integers, and float. On the right-hand side, you can see what an integer is and isn't. An integer is generally a whole number, so it can be -6, 0, 1, 21. Any number without fractions or decimals or mixed units are usually integers. So if Python is given a non-integer that's terminating, so that would be like 5.2, it would convert it into an integer. So 5.2 would just become 5. So now, what if it's given a repeating decimal, such as 3.333 or 1/3, which when converted becomes a decimal? Then it will just take whatever the number is before the decimal point. So if it was 1/3, then it would be 0.33333. It would just take 0. Note that it is not rounding down. It is just taking the numbers before the point. For floats, it can take decimals. So if given a fraction, it will convert it into a decimal. So 1/2 will become 0.5. It can understand ending decimals only. So if you write 0.35, it will leave it at 0.35. It won't change it to 0. But for terminating decimals, you can see it in the picture below. It just made 1/3 into 0.333, and then it ended it at some point. So in the pictures, you can see an integer, and you can see the float form of the exact same thing. So when you put int 0.5, you get 0, and when you put float 0.5, it leaves it 0.5. Similarly, when you do int 1 over 3, it gives you 0, because it's the point before the period. And for float, it would be 1 over 3, which would be 0.33333, but it would terminate.
Next, we have Boolean values. A Boolean is a data type with two possible outcomes, either true or false. For example, the statement 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 is true, while the statement 3 plus 2 is equal to 4 is false. If given multiple statements, Boolean evaluates them using the following procedure. Keep in mind this procedure is a bit complicated, so it's okay if you don't completely understand it the first time. If you have two different statements and an and in between them, both statements have to be true for the answer to be true. Otherwise, it's false. For example, if we look at our first example, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 and 3 plus 2 is equal to 4, that's a true statement and a false statement. True and false equates to false. If we have two statements and an or in between them, both statements must be false in order for the overall statement to be false. Otherwise, it's true. For example, if we look at our second example, we have 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 or 3 plus 2 is equal to 4. That's true or false, which equates to true. As I mentioned, this is a bit of a complicated concept, so don't be worried if you don't completely understand it the first time.
Letters and words. Letters and words are grouped into a data type, which is called strings. Strings must be expressed in quotes. They can either be single quotes, they can be double quotes, or they can even be triple quotes, though that's less commonly used. Strings can cover more than one line, and those are called multi-line strings. Strings have indexes, or places that start at 0. So if your word is cat, C in cat is 0, A is 1, T is 2, and so on. In the string hello, the letter H is at position 0, E is at position 1, and so on. So we see hello world there, and it might be useful to think about what numbers does each one get. So H is 0, E is 1, L is 2, the second L is 3, O is 4, and the space would be 5, and so on.
Now we're ready to start programming.
So the first thing we're going to learn in Python is the print statement, which is essentially one of the most used statements in Python and most coding languages. So the way to execute the statement is to do print and parentheses. So it would be print and then two parentheses beside it. The space between the print and parentheses doesn't actually affect your code, but it just helps you keep it organized. When printing a string, you would use quotes. It could either be single or double. So you can refer to our slides where we wrote hello with two double quotes, hello with two single quotes, but not double quote, single quote, and in the middle hello, or single quote, double quote, and in the middle hello. Do not use quotes for numbers or booleans. So when you're printing just 5.2, it would be print and then in parentheses 5.2 without any quotes. And when printing a number, an asterisk and icon will display the number of icons. So if you do 3 asterisk at, it will print at 3 times. So an asterisk is essentially like multiplying, so it will do it the amount of times requested. Note that capitals do matter. You cannot make the P in print capitalized or it will completely mess up your code, as Python cannot understand a capital P in print. Okay, now let's do a U-try. Instructions. Select the plus code button, which should be at the top left of your screen, and write a program that will result in the computer typing hello world. A challenge you can try is finding out what's wrong with this code. Pause the video if you need more time. Okay, let's look at the solution. So the solution for the first one is print, parentheses, single quotes, hello world, or double quotes, hello world. For the challenge, the two mistakes were the first one is print, they're all capitalized, and they should be lowercase. The second one is that there should be quotes around hi.
Now we're going to be covering comments. Comments are used to write feedback or information about code. In Google Colab, we have the option of using the plus text button to write text about our code. However, other coding platforms don't always have this option. So instead, programmers write comments about their code in the code itself. The hashtag represents a comment on Python. You must include a hashtag before you write a comment so that the system knows that it's not part of your program but a comment. Comments do not affect your code in any way. You know a comment has been written in Colab if the desired words are green. Unlike other coding languages, you can't write a comment on multiple lines in Python. So to write multiple line comments, you must put a hashtag at the front of each line. Now it's your turn to try. Write a comment explaining what your line of code does. If you have time and would like a challenge, you can also make another comment on a separate line explaining what the print statement is. You can pause the video if you need time to work on this activity. These are the answers to the you try and challenge.
Python has a variety of operators that can be used to change or modify information found within variables. You can try out the operators for yourselves to see what they do. Some things like adding true or false values together, or booleans, you'd think wouldn't be possible. Other things you may think are possible may not be, so feel free to experiment as much as you'd like.
The next concept we're going to learn is variables. So a variable is a symbol, letter, or number that has a value. For example, strings, integers, and booleans are all variables. Another example is x equals 2. So x is a variable and it holds the value 2. ASAP equals as soon as possible in our code. So the code ASAP holds the value as soon as possible. So remember that any strings you want to output should be in quotes, but it's not necessary for numbers. To print a variable, you would simply write in the print statement without quotation marks. So you can see that in the example, it would say example print ASAP. It would print the value of the variable ASAP, so it would print as soon as possible. To print a variable and string together, use plus signs. So please do it plus ASAP. The please do it was a string, so we put it in quotes, plus our code ASAP, which would basically decode it to be please do it ASAP. Please do it as soon as possible. And to change a variable, just assign it a different value later in the program, or you can use math. Let's do the you try. Instructions. Create a variable called my_number with any integer value of your choice. So remember, integer value is numbers that don't have decimals, fractions, or mixed units. And then the challenge is to increase the value of your variable by 5 using mathematical operators. So don't just change the value to add 5 to it, but actually use math to try to figure that part out. Okay, these are the solutions. The solution for the you try would be my_number equals whatever number you want. Here we put the number to equal 13. And you're going to use one equal sign. And for the challenge, it would be my_number equals my_number plus 5. And that would be adding 5 to whatever your current number is.
Now we're going to be covering lists. A list is similar to a variable except that it stores multiple values. Lists in Python are similar to lists that we create in real life, like attendance lists and grocery lists. They contain multiple ideas. In order to create a list, you need to type multiple values inside square brackets. For example, if we want to create a list called things, we write things is equal to, and in square brackets, we place the items we want in the list, such as banana, 3, and hello. Keep in mind that you need commas to separate each of the different items in the list. To extract a specific value from a list, place that value in brackets after the list name. For example, things, and then square brackets with 1 inside will extract the first item in the random list. Keep in mind lists do begin at 0, so banana would be at 0th position, 3 would be at 1st position, and hello would be at 2nd position. So things 1 would actually extract the first item, which is the value 3. In order to extract a random value from the list, you need to use the random.choice command. So as you can see in the example, we wrote random.choice, and inside circular brackets, we write the name of our list, which is in this case, things. Now, in order to add something to the end of the list, which is also called appending, we use the append value command. So in the example, we wrote things, which is the name of our list, dot append, which means that it would add it to the list. And in circular brackets, we write the item that we would like to add to the list. So when this program is run, scooter will be added as the next item to the list, right after hello. Now it's your turn to try. Create a list called my_food and type your 3 favorite foods as the items in the list. If you would like a challenge, you can add or append any item of your choice to the end of the list. You can pause this video if you need time to work on this activity. Your code for this activity should look something like this.
Let's learn about inputs. So in order to get an input from a particular statement, you need to use the input function. An example of an input is, what is your name? So you would write input, parentheses, and then quotes, what is your name? And it would display what is your name, as well as the box for the user to type their answer. Another example of an input is one using variables. So you could set the variable to food. Food equals input, what is your favorite food? And then it would display that sentence, and you would write whatever your favorite food is. So let's say my favorite food is pizza. I would write pizza, and it would change that to the variable value. So now you're telling it that food equals pizza. So to name a variable, you would think of a name first. So in this example, food was our name. So that's why it's highlighted. It's not exactly name, it's just whatever you name yours. Equals input, and then whatever your question is. Do note that we use strings here, and most of the times you will use strings, but there could be integers or floats inside those parentheses as well. And in those cases, there wouldn't be any quotes. Let's do the utry. So ask the user what their favorite number is and save the variable as favorite underscore number. Do not make them two separate words because that will make the program confused. It's better to just leave it all as one word, which you can do by doing favorite underscore and the number. The challenge is to print the favorite underscore number variable. So whatever the user put in, you would have to print that out. So these are the answers to the utry. The answer for the utry is favorite underscore number equals input, what is your favorite number, which is quoted and in parentheses. And for the challenge, you would print, along with that program below it, you would also write print and then in parentheses favorite underscore number, which would print whatever the value was that the user put in.
Through a method called concatenation, Python allows you to add two or more of the same data type together. This is useful for doing things like joining multiple strings together. You can use both plus signs and commas for this, and a plus sign will have no space, whereas a comma will have a space between the two pieces of data. However, using a plus sign with integers and floats will not work because Python will confuse it as addition.
Now it's your turn to try. Concatenate or add words together that will make the sentence, hi, my name is, and your name. If you want a challenge, you can also try to find the mistakes in this statement. You can pause the video if you need time to work on this activity. These are the answers to the utry and challenge. Now let's talk about if-else statements. If-else statements carry out different actions based on a particular option. They're just like in real life. When if we want to go to school, we have to take a left, or if we want to go to the grocery store, we have to take a right, or if we want to go home, we have to go straight. There are three different terms in if statements, but not all three have to be used. If comes first. Then we have elif, which also stands for else if and comes after the if. It's another possibility that takes place only if the first option isn't true. Then we have else, which is final. This only takes place when the other options aren't valid. For example, if we look at our example over here, we have if x is equal to 5, print hello. It's pretty self-explanatory. If x is equal to 5, the statement will print hello. Elif x is equal to 3, it will print what? So if x is not 5 and x is 3, then it will print what? And then we have else print error. So if x is either 5 or 3, then it will print error. Keep in mind that there must be a colon at the end of your if statement. So we have if x is equal to 5, colon. Another thing is that you can add more than one condition to an if statement. So you can say if x and y, or if x or y, as we mentioned previously in the Booleans. Equal signs also must be used with a double equal sign, not just a single equal sign. So if x is equal to 5, you have two equal signs for if statements. Now it's your turn to try. Create a variable x and write a blank if-else statements for 3 different values of variable x. If you would like a challenge, you can also write print commands inside each of your if statements. You can print anything you want. You can pause this video if you need time to work on this activity. These are the answers to the utry and challenge.
Next, let's talk about a really powerful tool that Python offers, loops. Loops can be used to reiterate or repeat a piece of code multiple times as long as the condition is not met. For example, if I had a variable x and a condition that said as long as x is not greater than 3, the segment of code will repeat. And keep in mind that with loops, you must have a colon at the end of the condition to signify that it is the condition, to signify the difference between the condition and the code that you want to iterate through.
Now it's your turn to try. Create a variable x and write a blank while loop for any value of x. If you would like a challenge, you can also write print commands inside the while loop. You can pause this video if you need time to work on this activity. These are the answers to the U-Try and challenge.
The next part of Python that we're going to learn is how to change variable values. So it's kind of like adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing to a number. So I want to add 1 to a number, I want to add 2 to a number, kind of like that. So unlike while loops, the number of repetitions to be none is known prior to receiving the result. And I know that might not completely make sense at this point, but don't worry, it's not that important for now, and you will learn about it as you go more advanced into Python. So how would you change a variable? If I want to add 1 every time, it would just be x equals x plus 1. So if I said x was 0 in the beginning of my code, now x equals 1 because x is equals x plus 1. So x equals 1. And so on. So you can see an example program here where we set y to equal 0, and we said while y is less than 5. So as long as y is less than 5, y equals y plus 1. So initially y is 0, 0 is less than 5, so 0 equals 0 plus 1. So now y equals 1, and it prints that. And it does that until it comes to 5. And then 5 is no longer less than 5, so it stops the program. Okay, now for the U-Try. Your instructions are to write a program that will display the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So in the program that I showed you, it displayed the numbers 1 through 5. You're trying to just do 1, 2, and 3. And the challenge is to write a program that outputs all the numbers from negative 10 to 10. So negative 10, negative 9, negative 8, so on until 9 and 10. Feel free to pause the video. The answers to them were, for the first one, y equals 0, and while y is less than 3, y equals y plus 1, and print y. And for the challenge, the answer was y equals negative 11, while y was less than 10, y equals y plus 1, and you would print y. For loops. For loops are used to repeat a piece of code as long as the given statement is true, and it's often confused with a while loop in the beginning of programming, but don't worry, it will start to make more sense about the differences as you go on. For now, just think of it as a different sort of loop. But unlike while loop, the number of repetitions to be done is known prior to receiving the result, which, like I was talking about earlier, might not completely make sense now, but don't worry, it's not too important. So an example of a for loop is for x in range 7, and then you would put colons, print x. So if you put that, it will automatically assume that x equals 0. That's just the default of Python, because as you may have already learned, indexing, it starts at 0. So x, we're just going to assume x is 0 from the beginning. So it would be 0 is in the range of 7. By range, it means less than. So 0 is less than 7, so we printed that value. So it started printing 0. And then x equals x plus 1. So now it became 1. 1 is still in the range, 2 is still in the range. And finally, we get to 6, which is in the range, so we print it. But when we do plus 1, we get 7, which is not in the range of 7. So the program will stop. And like I said earlier, you cannot forget the colon. The colon is extremely important, and it will mess up your code if it's not there. So to make sure that you have the colon, when you go to the next line, it should indent it. And you want to keep that indent because it tells you that your colon is working, and it will also help run the program smoothly. Okay, for the U-Try, we're going to write a for loop that will output the numbers 0, 1, and 2. So last time we did 0 to 6, and now you're just doing 0, 1, and 2. And for a hint, it's for blank in range blank colon. And for the challenge, find 3 errors in the program. So for r in rank 2, print r. Okay, let's look at the answers now. For the first one, the answer was for x in range 3, print x. So I know we did the x plus 1, all of that earlier, but genuinely that's not completely needed because it will automatically just add one when it goes on. That's the default of Python. But it is always better to put the x+1 because it just makes your work more flowable and someone can read your code and understand it better. For the challenge, the range spelling should have been range, and there should have been parentheses, and there should not have been a semicolon, it should have been a colon. So you can refer to the pictures given to look at what the right answer should have been.
Now we're going to be discussing functions. Functions are actually something that we use in our day-to-day lives. For example, when we tell someone to tie their shoes, we are essentially telling them to pick up one lace, pick up another lace, cross them over, bring one lace under, and pull. However, every time we tell someone to tie their shoes, we don't have to repeat all of these commands. Instead, we can repeat the big umbrella command of tie your shoes, under which all of these commands are saved. Therefore, every time we say tie your shoes, someone executes all these steps without having to individually be told all of them. The same thing works in Python. Instead of having to individually repeat long sets of instructions, if we're able to save it under one large umbrella command, we can execute that command every time we want that function to happen. Some of the functions that we've been using so far are print, integer, float, and input. These are all functions that are built into Python directly. However, you can also create your own functions in Python. First, you have to define your function using the short name def, followed by the name of your function, which can be anything, and then parentheses and a colon. You then press enter, and on the next line, you can write your commands inside the function. For example, in our shoes example, we would have def tie your shoes, and then our parentheses and colon, and on the inside, we would have all the instructions I just mentioned to successfully tie your shoes. Now, in order to execute these functions, you simply have to write the name of the function followed by parentheses, and the function should run. Now it's your turn to practice. For this activity, program a function that will result in the number 13 being outputted. If you want a challenge, you can also make a function in which the user inputs a number and that will add the function will add 5 to. You can pause this video if you need time to work on this challenge. The answers are displayed over here on this slide.
Okay, the next thing we're going to learn is casting. Casting is converting a variable value from one type to another. It's a very simple concept if you get to learn about it properly. So we have int, stir, and float, which was integers, words, and decimals. So let's say we want to make 5, which is an integer, into a float. We would do float 5, and it would make it 5.0 because float can take decimals. What if we wanted to make the same 5 into a string? It would just put quotes around the 5, which symbolizes that it's now a word. And what if you wanted to make 5.2 into integer? You would just put int 5.2 and it would make it into 5 because integers cannot read decimals. So let's try the utry activity that goes along with it. Make 13.5 into a whole number, which means no decimals. So something you might want to think about is using the int command. And a challenge is to make the whole number you produced into a string. Let's look at the answers now. The answer for the first one was int and 13.5 inside the parentheses. And the answer for the challenge is string, and then in parentheses int, and then in parentheses 13.5. Some people might have also put string or str13, which is also okay, but this is what more advanced programmers do. But for now, either of them is okay.
In regards to other useful information that didn't fit into any of the above categories, to begin with, indents are needed after if, while, or for statements in Python. For example, if you have an if or while statement over here, in the next line, when you command what to put inside that if or while statement, you're going to need to have an indent, a little bit of space before, to make it clear that that's part of the if statement, or else your program will not run in Google Colab. When programming in Python, indents must be created using either the spacebar or the tab button, but you cannot use a mixture of both because Python will not read that. You can import modules which will allow you to use various new statements. For example, if you import the module random, you can use the random choice statement, which can make you pick a random choice out of a bunch of selected options. This is only if you import particular modules to have an extra set of functions or commands. If you want to find the length or string of a variable, you can use the len function. You write len, you put parentheses, and you put your content inside, be it a variable or a string. Now, for conditional tests, if you want to find out if a letter is a part of a particular word or a list, you use the if blank in blank command. For example, as you can see on the screen, we have an if A in happy command. So when this runs, what it does is it essentially searches for the letter A in the word happy, as we mentioned in the code.
Now that we know the basics of Python, let's apply our knowledge to make our own project.
Now we're going to be creating our project. For our project, we're going to be making a simpler version of Hangman without the visual representation using the Python programming that we've learned so far. We will go line by line, giving you verbal clues on what to program. After a few seconds, we will reveal the answer. You can correct your errors then if there are any. For the very first step, you have to import the module random. We'll give you a few seconds to complete this. The answer to this is import random. Simply write these words in your program. For the second step, you have to make a list called words that includes any words of your choice. We'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. So this is one sample answer to this. We've created a list called words, and inside we've written hello, hi, and banana using quotes. You can use single or double quotes. For the third step, you have to create a variable called word that picks a random word from the list we've just created. We'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. This is the answer to this step. We've created a variable called word, and we've set that to random.choice, and in parentheses, we've written the list of words, which is the name of our previous list that we created in step 2. For the fourth step, we have to create an empty list called guessed_letters. As the game progresses, the player's guesses will be stored here. We'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. So this is the answer to the fourth step. We've created a list called guessed_letters, and we've set that equal to two empty square brackets. There's nothing inside the square brackets because the game hasn't started yet, so the player still hasn't guessed any letters. For the fifth step, you have to create a variable called tries, and you have to set that to 10, essentially meaning that the player has 10 tries. We'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. So the answer to this step is tries is equal to 10. We've created a variable called tries, and we've set that to the number 10. Keep in mind you don't need quotation marks since this is a number. For the sixth step, you have to create a variable called guessed and set it to false. This essentially means that the user hasn't guessed yet. When the user does guess the word correctly, you can change this to true. We'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. Your code should look something like this. Guessed is equal to false. Keep in mind that you don't need quotes for the false since false is a Boolean value.
Alright, so our next step is to write a print statement that will tell the player the length of the word. So, like you just learned, len will tell you the number of letters in a word. So we would print in parentheses and in quotes the word contains, comma, len and the word, which would tell us the number of letters, and then comma, in quotes, letters. So it would be, for example, if the word is cat, it would be the word contains 3 letters. After that, we're going to write a statement that prints the word represented as asterisks or another icon. So we don't want the user to actually see the word. We want them to just see how many letters the word has. So it would be print len word, which is the number of words, times the asterisk. And I told you in the beginning that the asterisk itself would multiply the number. So if it was len word would be like 3 letters, it would just put the asterisk 3 times. So if it was cat, that would count as 3 letters, and it would put the asterisk 3 times. The ninth step is to create a while loop that repeats as long as a user has tries and does not guess the word. So you would write while, and then guessed equals false. So they have not guessed the correct answer yet, and tries is more than 0. So they have tried more than once. And then you would put a colon, and inside this, so it would be indented, so make sure that it is indented or else your program won't really work. You're going to write a statement that tells the player how many tries they have left. So it would print, and then you have plus these many tries, so blank tries, and that string tries would be the amount of tries you had left. So we defined the tries previously, so that would be what you were putting here, plus in parentheses tries. So you can refer the program on the screen, and this would basically tell you you have 10 tries, which is the default value because you haven't guessed yet. Now we're going to write a command that asks the user to enter a letter or the full word and store their input in a variable called guess. So we're going to say guess equals input, and then in parentheses we're going to write please enter one letter or the full word. So here's where the user enters letters to play the hangman game. Moving on, let's go to step 12. So based on the length of the word, we have to determine whether the user entered a letter or a full word. So we need to create an if, else, elif statement with two possibilities. The length of the guess is 1 or the length of the guess is greater than 1. So for this statement, we don't need an else because it's just if or else if. So we would just do if len guess equals 1. So if the len guess is 1, then you would put colons, and then the next line, do not have it indented. So take out the indent if it's already there, and put elif len guess is more than or equal to 1, and put the colons again. So basically, if the letters inputted is more than 1, or if it's just at 1. So inside the if guess equals 1 statement, we want to put another if slash elif statement with three possibilities. The letter is a word, the letter is not a word, and the letter is a list of guessed letters. So it would be if guess in guessed underscore letters, and then elif guess in word, and then elif guess not in word. So it would be the first one is have they already guessed a letter? The second one is it one of the letters in the word? And the third one is if it's not one of the letters in the word.
So for our next few steps, we're going to create another if-else. So if the letter was already guessed, we're going to have an if statement saying if guess in guessed letters, which is asking if the guess is already something that the user has inputted. We're going to print the statement guess was already guessed. We're going to have an else if statement after that saying else if guess in word, which just means if the guess is in the word, we're going to print the statement guess is in the word, and we're going to append guess onto the guessed letters list. And next, if the guess is not in the code, we're going to have another else if saying if guess not in word. We're going to print the statement guess plus is not a part of the word. And we're going to subtract 1 from our tries variable, which if you remember, hit 0, the game will end. And then after that, we're going to append the guess onto the guessed letters list.
Now we're going to go back to the first if-elif statement that we wrote. We're going to write the code for the second statement in this. For step 17, write a statement that checks if the guess is equal to the word. I'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. The answer should look something like this. If guess is equal to word, colon. Make sure the equal is a double equal sign. For step 18, if so, we need to print word is correct, and word in this case refers to the word that the user is playing hangman with. We'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. This is what your answer should look like. It should say print, and in parentheses, you have guessed the word. It is dot plus the variable word. Your code may not look exactly like this, but it should be fairly similar. For step 19, the variable guessed should now become true. I'll give you a few seconds to work on this, but you can pause the video if you need more time. The answer should look something like this. Guessed is equal to true. Once again, true does not need quotation marks since it is a Boolean value. Now that we're done with our code, let's get a full view to see if there's any errors and to correct them. Thank you to everyone who has attended our workshop today. If you would like to get a copy of these slides or updates on future sessions, please do fill out this form mentioned on the slide. In addition, if you have any questions or concerns about today or about our program in general, you can email us at siliconvalley.astepahead@gmail.com. Also, make sure to check out our website, siliconvalley.wixsite.com/astepahead. Thank you, and we hope you have a great day. A Step Ahead would like to thank the Dayton Metro Library for providing us with this opportunity.